Hey guys, what's up? JK with PornReboot here. Today we're going to be talking about how to use the internet responsibly when you're trying to quit pornography. One of the things that I've noticed with many men who are beginning their journey to end their out-of-control behavior with porn and masturbation is that once they've identified that pornography is a problem, you try to create boundaries with porn. It is, however, important to realize that sometimes when you have out-of-control behavior with pornography, it's sometimes because you are using it to medicate some sort of pain. And that pain could be anything from loneliness to stress, to boredom. Got my cat Frosty there who's sitting in her box, you know. If it fits, I sit, like they say. As I was saying, we use it to medicate different types of pain. It could be stress, it could be some sort of unresolved issue from your past, it could be loneliness, it could be boredom for many guys. Whatever the case may be, if you're using porn to medicate an issue, it's also possible that you're using something else on the internet to medicate a feeling. So let's say you get stressed at work and you don't have access to pornography. Well, you hop on Instagram and you start swiping through Instagram. The time you would usually spend on porn is spent on Instagram. But you've created these very powerful neural connections in your brain, these neural pathways that ultimately lead to porn because that's the most amount of stimuli you're going to receive. And what happens is that when you're on Instagram, you could be scrolling, and many of you have had this experience, and then you come across a girl who's working out, a girl in a bikini, and it triggers you. And you want to have more stimuli, but your brain has been trained for the stimuli of hardcore pornography. So it's not enough for you to just masturbate to the picture of this girl. So what you do is you promptly break your boundary that you have with online pornography. You watch porn and you found out that you slipped. And this cycle keeps repeating itself. But what you may not have realized is that it's not that you're struggling so much with pornography. It's just that you haven't started the reboot process the right way. You haven't set up the right boundaries. And unfortunately, for a lot of guys, there have to be more boundaries, and those boundaries have to go beyond pornography. So I'm going to be talking about some of the ways that you can set up boundaries with the internet. And I'm going to say one thing before I begin. A few of these boundaries, or all these boundaries, might sound a little bit restrictive, especially if you spend a lot of time on the internet. But I've worked with over 500 men one-on-one. We have a lot of guys in our coaching program. We have thousands of students who have come through our courses. And one of the things that we've discovered is that when you set up strong boundaries with the internet, it makes the rewiring process from your addiction to online pornography much easier. The first thing to do is get a filter. And what a filter does is that it automates the process of blocking pornography, blocking social media, blocking a few other things that you use to medicate your pain when you're on the internet. So instead of you trying to use your willpower to stay away from Instagram, or to stay away from YouTube if that's triggering for you, or to stay away from a specific blog site or website, you can just have the filter do it for you. And the filter that I recommend is Covenant Eyes. The reason why I recommend Covenant Eyes is twofold. I recommend it because it has an accountability or ally feature. And the reason why they have that is because the folks at Covenant Eyes understand that filtering devices are not enough. As many of you may have experienced, when you put a filter on your device, you bypass it one way or the other. If you really want to find pornography, find something to masturbate to, you're going to find it. But when you add that accountability feature and features like screen capture, what it does is that you're now in a situation where if you view something that is explicit, a screenshot will be taken of it, blurred out, and then sent to your accountability partner. In addition to your accountability partner being able to see the things that you've been viewing or the sites that you've been visiting while you're on the internet. So that serves as a much stronger deterrent than just a filter. And when you have a filter of any type, whether it's a different type and Covenant Eyes or Covenant Eyes on its own, you basically have two lines of defense against anything that could cause you to slip. So Covenant Eyes is what I recommend. There's a link to try them out in the description below. All you need to do is use the code REBOOT1 at checkout, and that's going to give you access to 30 days free to try out Covenant Eyes. That is the first step. The next step is to stop using social media unless you make money from it. Yes, I said that. And I know that's a difficult one for many people to swallow, but if you're using social media just for entertainment purposes and you have found yourself in a situation where you were triggered by social media, my recommendation is to give it up for a while, okay? It's gonna help the rewiring process. You're not going to be exposed to triggering material, and most importantly, you're not going to be able to find pornography, because you can find porn on Instagram, you can find porn, there's a bunch of it on Snapchat, and you can definitely find porn on Facebook, and you can find it on YouTube. I'm including YouTube in this, yes. And all I'm suggesting is that you take a brief hiatus from all this social media for 30 to 90 days. I suggest 90 days, but I know most men can only go 30 days. If you can go more than 30 days, kudos to you. I did that during my recovery, and it was one of the best things that I did for myself. And all I suggest is that you do this while you're trying to quit pornography and see what the difference is. Most guys, especially those who go through one of my coaching programs, at the end of 30 days or the end of 90 days of working with me, they have no desire to go back on social media. They realize, first of all, that they can live without it. They also realize that one of the reasons why it was so difficult for them to quit when they were working on their own before they teamed up with a mentor was because they had free access to social media. They always had something to go to. But without social media, now they had to read books, they had to go out and be social, they had to pick up hobbies or pick up their old hobbies, dust them off, and engage in them again, or they had to spend time with their kids or their partner. So believe it or not, you'll be surprised at the number of things that you're missing out on in life when you're spending time on social media. The third is give up news websites and blogs. I noticed early when I started coaching and mentoring men that they would stay off pornography and they would stay off social media, but I noticed a lot of them were still slipping. And it wasn't because of other issues, because they were being coached through those things. But I found out that a lot of them still felt that need to medicate things like loneliness and boredom. So a typical scenario is somebody who's at work and you're doing some work that's very, very stressful, and you want to get away from it because it's repetitive or you just don't like it. So he jumps on his phone and then he's like, oh, I can't get on social media and I can't watch pornography, I can't do anything like that. So the next thing he does is he goes to a news website or he gravitates towards some gossip blog. Why do you gravitate towards those things? Well, it's because of the novelty. You're just getting a dopamine hit from all the different headlines that you're seeing, all the sensational news. But you don't realize that there is a neurochemical reaction going on, and all you're searching for is just something to satisfy that because you're so used to having those neurochemicals released to make you feel better. The reality is, outside of blogs and news sites, there are healthier ways of making yourself feel better in a stressful situation. When you distract yourself and you run to the news or you run to something sensational or you go to read a blog that is entertaining, you are not dealing with the issue at hand. Whatever it is that's causing you to get stressed out doesn't get resolved. And that's why you find many men who are in their late 20s, in their mid 30s, many men in their 40s and 50s whose level of frustration has not gone up, which means that as you grow older, as a man, as a human being, you should be able to handle more stress, especially mental stress. It doesn't make sense if you are highly skilled in a particular area, but you are always stressed out. 10 years later, you're stressed out. 2 years from now, you're still stressed out. So it means that something is wrong. And usually what is wrong is that the areas that you find challenging, you're not dealing with them. You're running away from them, and there's less and less awareness of what's happening. It's very surprising. Sometimes I work with some men and they just think that it's their job that's stressful. But once I've helped them create these boundaries and they have to sit there, or they have to meditate, or they have to speak to someone, or they have to take a break and go to the gym, something other than distracting themselves with technology, they start finding out the real reason why they get stressed out, or why they feel lonely, or why they get upset. In one case, one of my clients found out that there was just a manager that he really didn't like. And every time this specific manager assigned a task to him, he immediately got stressed out. It didn't matter what the task was. It was just an issue he had with that specific manager. Somebody else could give him a task that was way more challenging. He would just be in the right mindset to do it. And it was crazy. For him, it was mind-blowing because he'd been dealing with this problem for about 3 years. There were also some other men who, once all these boundaries had been set for them, they found out that the reason that they were feeling very depressed and lonely and isolated from other people was because they had built a habit of purposely isolating from people. So they'd built this habit where when there are a lot of people around having a conversation and they don't find the conversation interesting, they would just get on their device and just kind of fade into the background and disappear, or just distract themselves because they just didn't want to put in the effort to communicate with those other people, or they just didn't like the subject matter. The funny thing is that, unfortunately for them, they just kept doing that all the time. And unfortunately, the things you find on your phone when you disengage from connecting with a person is often more interesting, it's more stimulating to you than interacting with other human beings. Over time, that becomes a habit. That habit continues and it just becomes your temperament. And after that, it just becomes your personality. People start thinking that that's the type of person you are. You're just a person who is isolated and alone. And one day you try to, maybe somebody talks to you about it, or you read about it in a book. Something happens that kind of makes you realize that, hey, maybe I could work on talking to people more. But now you've done it for so long, you've disconnected with technology for so long, that it becomes very challenging to put yourself back among people and to find regular conversation, banter, even fluff talk. You find that very challenging, and that causes you to feel isolated and sometimes even rejected. With this specific client, when we realized he had this problem and he ran a business, I would coach him through having conversations with his employees again. Just regular basic conversation, which is very uncomfortable for him. He could talk about stuff that was related to work, but that made him a very distant person from his employees because all they saw was just this very strict, business-minded individual who really didn't care about their personal lives or anything else that was going on. But once he started having these conversations with them, he found it challenging at first, but the next thing he knew is that they started asking him about his life. And suddenly he was like, wow, I don't feel lonely anymore, because once in a while, my employees and the people around me actually go like, hey, how's your wife? How's your kid? You know, how did they do in the track meets? Like little questions like that. And then suddenly he started feeling that he wasn't so alone. And it all began by creating boundaries with his technology and making an effort to connect with those who were around him. My fourth suggestion is consider putting aside a very specific time as entertainment time. A lot of guys complain to me that they feel fatigued throughout the day. They're like, maybe it's a result of my porn addiction. That's why I'm always tired and fatigued, and I just feel like I don't have energy to push through the day. Now, when a man comes to me to work with me and he complains about fatigue, I don't automatically assume that it is due to pornography. We first go through a health check. It could be a possible health issue. It could be, vitamin D deficiency. He might be deficient in B vitamins. He might have a problem with his thyroid. He might have low testosterone. All those things are things that a qualified medical professional can help him with. But I do have a checklist to go through all those issues. Another thing I go through before we even talk about pornography is I look at how he's spending his day. Most of you do not realize that when you spend a lot of time jumping from a task you're trying to focus on to entertainment, your brain, our brains, are not designed to handle that much stimuli. Our brains can't handle jumping from Tinder to Instagram to Facebook to YouTube, and doing that hundreds of times a day. That's how many times you're doing that. Some of you have no idea how many times you're opening specific apps. But what that does is that absolutely exhausts your brain, and you find yourself always being exhausted, always being tired, always being fatigued, because your brain is doing so much work. It's processing and rejecting so much information, then consuming a little bit, and while you're doing that, you're training your attention span to become smaller and smaller and smaller. So a lot of times guys will hop on a game and play a game for a little bit, or watch a series for 30 minutes in the middle of the day, or hop on the Xbox or PlayStation and play for a little bit. All these things are distractions, and they are not helping your brain rewire. In fact, they are putting you in a state where you still are trying to medicate something, some emotion, some pain, some situation that you are experiencing in the moment. You want to run away from it and distract yourself. And if you keep running away from it, you are eventually going to end up running to the most powerful thing, the thing that releases the most amount of dopamine, and that is pornography. Do you see the connection? So my suggestion, and I suggest this, actually I enforce this with many of my clients, is having a specific time for entertainment. I do the same thing myself. I love anime. I still watch Netflix. There are a couple of series that I follow here and there, but all of this is done during a pre-scheduled time. There's a specific time in the day that is dedicated to this, and after that it's on to other things. This is one of the best ways to conserve your energy. It's one of the best ways to maintain your recovery and have some structure around it. Finally, learn how to build a life outside of the internet. One of the first things that I examine when a man comes to work with me as his mentor is we take a look at different aspects of his life. We look at things like his community. We examine his biochemistry, what is happening with his biology. We also take a look at his environment. And when I talk about environment, a lot of men assume that I'm talking about this sort of environment, where they live, where they work. Yes, we look at that. A lot of us also have another environment that we do not take into account, and that environment is the internet. For many of us, our social lives are on the internet. All our entertainment is on the internet. Our validation, and for the most unfortunate of us, in my opinion, our sense of self and our entire self-image is built on the internet. I'm not going to go too deep into it. I'll definitely put together another video on that topic, but it is important to start creating a life outside of the internet. That's actually where life happens. Yes, you do have emotional reactions. You experience emotions when you're in front of a screen and you are engaging with the internet. But the real life-changing stuff happens offline. It happens many times when you are alone and when you are in solitude. It happens many times when you are one-on-one with somebody. It happens after an interaction with a group of people or with another person. It happens spontaneously in nature. The truly important things are happening outside, not on the internet. So building a life in an environment outside of the internet is very important. So there you have it, guys. How to use the internet responsibly while quitting pornography. If you would like to learn how my clients who have stayed off from pornography from 2 to 5 years have done so, if you would like to learn the system that they used, I've put it all together in my free ebook called Confessions of a Porn Addict, 7 Secrets of Porn-Free Men. And you can get a copy of that in the description below. I'm JK, your brother in this struggle. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. I'll see you later in the week. Have a great day.